We are live. I'm Mehdi Hasan. Welcome to a Zeteo live town hall on Saturday night. I'm in a hotel room in a different time zone to Trita Parsi, who's here from the Quincy Institute, author of multiple books on Iran, an expert on the country. Donald Trump has bombed Iran, as some of us feared he would. Tonight, the anti-war president, the America First president, bombed, I believe, Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo, the underground mountain facility. He says American planes are on their way back. Let's just see what else he says. If you haven't seen his piece, he says, we've completed our very successful attack. A full payload of bombs was dropped on Fordo. Our planes are on their way home. Congratulations to our American warriors. He says, now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter in that weird way that he talks. Bombing through peace. Trita, what is your immediate reaction to this? Did you see this coming?
My immediate reaction to this is that Donald Trump has guaranteed that Iran will be a nuclear weapon state in 5 to 10 years from now. And it will particularly be the case if the regime changes. And I say that because I find it more likely that the regime change that at some point will happen in Iran, of course, given the unpopularity of this regime, will go in a much more aggressive nationalistic direction, particularly after a bombing of this kind. We saw, for instance, after the Israelis also had a very successful raid against Osirak in Iraq in 1981, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Saddam Hussein quadrupled his nuclear budget and pushed much, much faster towards nuclear weapon. And even though initially it was viewed as a successful raid, after a while, the non-proliferation consensus was that this actually made the situation much worse and would have led to Iraq becoming a full-scale nuclear power had it not been for 2 or 3 additional wars that took place after that. And those were full-scale invasions.
Yes, his invasion of Kuwait, which of course led to the bombing and invasion of Iraq in 1991 and beyond. This is an interesting moment now because Donald Trump is claiming some kind of victory. The New York Times is reporting that, you know, the administration thought that Israel had only set back Iran's nuclear program 6 months. They keep jumping around with these dates. Tulsi Gabbard was saying yesterday they're weeks away from a nuke. Netanyahu's been saying they're months away from a nuke for, 20 years now. The U.S. Intelligence community, according to CNN, said they were 3 years away from a nuclear weapon. So what is going on here in terms of kind of timelines? You talk about them going weapons, full weapons in the next 5-10 years. But put that to one side for a moment. In terms of where we are today in June of 2025, what was he actually hitting here? What was the goal and what could they have achieved?
Well, we don't know yet what has been achieved in the sense that it's still dark, might be starting to get light there. We don't know the assessment. Trump immediately saying that this was successful. It's very difficult to verify whether that is the case or not. We do know that the Iranians very likely had already moved out a lot of sensitive stuff from Fordo, including their stockpile. And their stockpile is the most important thing from their perspective in terms of having a nuclear
uranium.
60, 20, and 3.67%. And the reason for that is that takes years to be able to build up. Of course, they had started to do so at a rather fast pace. If the Iranians want to have a secret nuclear weapons program, it's actually much smaller than having an industrial scale energy program. So they can do that in that vast country in much smaller spaces. If the Iranians now walk out of the NPT, which seems very, very likely, there will be no ears or eyes inside of that program any longer. I don't think the Russians and the Chinese will have the same negative reaction to an Iranian exit from the NPT compared to what they would have done had this happened just after the exit of the JCPOA from Trump, etc. So I think we're in a very different, uncharted territory right now. And I think a lot of other countries are looking at this and saying, you know what? It seems like it's a good idea to actually have a nuclear deterrence, because when you don't, this is what potentially happens to you.
My image is frozen because I'm in a hotel room, but I hope you can still hear me.
I can hear you.
I'm back. I'm glad we're talking tonight because you know your stuff, and you mentioned Osirak in 1981, and people don't realize that when you bomb someone in this way, they're more likely to get nukes, not less. And Saddam Hussein did accelerate the nuclear program covertly after 1981, and Osirak and Israel saw that as a victory then.
And had he invaded Kuwait 6 months later, he probably would have had nuclear weapons by that point.
Yes,
because
I think the consensus is that was a failed strike. But also, as you say, other countries, if I'm Turkey, if I'm Erdogan, I'm thinking I need a nuclear weapons program. If I'm Saudi Arabia, I'm MBS. I'm thinking I don't trust the Israelis or the Americans. This is only going to increase the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region.
Absolutely.
Because it was never about non-proliferation, right? Just like Gaza was never about the hostages. It was about regime change.
Exactly.
Iran
Exactly.
is not about nuclear weapons, because this is not the way you stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. They were going to be at the table in
The
Muscat
Israelis preferred a nuclear Iran that was isolated,
Yep.
contained, impoverished through sanctions, essentially cornered, and with very, very bad relations with the West,
Yep.
than a non-nuclear Iran that was opened, that had better relations with the West, no sanctions, its economy could grow, because at the end of the day, this is about what type of a geopolitical challenge Iran poses.
Yes.
The nuclear element is there. It's not unimportant, but it's not the driving thing here.
Agreed.
Keep in mind, the Israeli Atomic Energy Agency endorsed the JCPOA, the nuclear deal that Obama struck, because from a nuclear non-proliferation perspective, it was an excellent deal. But from the perspective of Netanyahu, who,
Yes.
as we have seen, wants conflict, wants war, and felt that it was crucial to make sure that the US and Iran never could actually have good relations, then it was a major problem. I remember that image when, in the midst of the negotiations, Hassan Rouhani's, the president at the time, mother passed away. Rouhani's brother was a part of the negotiating team. And John Kerry, Wendy Sherman, Rob Malley, many others went over to his hotel room to express their condolences. And there's an image of John Kerry embracing him. It was a very human moment. And that was a nightmare moment from the Israeli side, because what would it mean for Israel if the United States and Iran actually managed to resolve their problems?
Yes. And didn't they then smear Kerry, because I believe his son-in-law is Iranian, and they went after him on that as well? I mean, you're right. This is all about breaking this up. They broke up the JCPOA, which we should remind viewers, a lot of Israeli intelligence and military folks supported, right? Their former heads of Shin Bet, Mossad, Ephraim Halevi, others said this is a good deal for Israel. This completely new.
And what was happening on Capitol Hill at the time was that you had the Israeli embassy lobbying against it, and then you had a lot of Israeli intelligence and other officers lobbying in favor.
It's about politics, not about security.
Yeah.
We should point out, a lot of people watching us, over 5,000 people have joined the chat, have joined the live on YouTube and on Substack, joining us tonight on this historic night, historically bad night. I should point out to people joining, Donald Trump has launched an attack on Iran tonight, hitting 3 sites, Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordo. A completely illegal attack, completely criminal attack. It's a violation of international law. It's a violation of the UN Charter. It's a violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's a violation of the US Constitution, which does not give the president the right to start a war without congressional approval. So we are in a very strange space where the guy who ran on the anti-war platform went to Michigan, told Muslim American, Arab American, Lebanese American, Iranian American voters, I'm your guy. I'm not Liz Cheney. I'm not Kamala Harris the Hawk. He has now done what hawks have been dreaming about. I think it's fair to say, Trita, for 20, 30 years, the John Boltons of this world, the neocons, they've been desperate for a war with Iran. And Donald Trump, not George W. Bush, not Joe Biden, but Donald Trump is the guy who's given them the war they've been waiting for.
Absolutely. And I think this is going to be very interesting to see how that actually plays out in his base, because as I'm sure you saw, and I think you even mentioned in the program that you did with Tommy Vitter and Reza Aslan, how some of the strongest voices against this is actually coming from his own base. I mean, from very surprising directions, perhaps, in terms of Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, for instance. So it's going to be very interesting to see. A lot of that base had really embraced the anti-war message. This went beyond just the loyalty towards Trump. Where will they be on this? Keep in mind, in the initial phases, there will probably be some rallying around the flag phenomenon, particularly if the Iranians strike back. But then I think we will see the real picture once it starts becoming clear that perhaps this wasn't that successful. Perhaps this is not this kind of a simple one-off and then it's done and then you're back at the negotiating table, because I have a really hard time seeing how negotiations can start under these circumstances. And I think then we will see exactly how that will play out for him.
I mean, Trump is posting tonight on his post, now is the time for peace, which is a typically Orwellian American imperialistic position. We get to bomb you and then say, now is the time for peace. That's how the global South has always seen Western imperialists. You get to bomb and then say, hey, time for peace and negotiation. Although I genuinely think this will bring them back.
Even if he's exactly, even if he's genuine about that, this would be now the 3rd time in what, 8 or 9 days, in which he first says that he doesn't want a war. You know, he schedules a negotiation, and then it turns out that he gave some sort of a yellow light to the Israelis. Then he said, oh, I'm going to give this 2 weeks, moves all of his assets to do the attack, does the attack after 2 days rather than the 2 weeks. So to come now and say, hey, I want to get back to the table, I don't think the Iranians believed him in the first instance. I think that's part of the reason why you didn't see the Iranians respond to the messages that he was sending through the Turks and others for talks, because they were probably getting messages at the same time that the strike actually is coming. So I think, again, all of this ultimately does not really end in the manner that Trump wants, unless he can get some sort of a deal that has inspections and things of that nature. And it is really difficult to see how that can happen. And that is what the Israelis are going to use now. They're going to go back and say, we did a lot, but they still have stuff left. And in order to finish that, you need to go in with ground troops, or you need to do this more bombing, or you need to do this constant, endless war bombing in order to make sure that you actually achieve what you said that you achieved in your tweet.
And I should apologize to people joining. I've got laggy hotel Wi-Fi, but we're doing this as a breaking news town hall reacting. We appreciate Trita from the Quincy Institute taking time out to just walk us through this. Just what do the Iranians do next in terms of the nuclear program now? Because one thing I've been saying for a while is that there are only two options. You either do a deal or you invade and occupy the country. This bombing stuff does not work. You can bomb Fordo, but as you say, they can move the materials. They can move the scientists. We can flatten Iran, God help us all, in the United States, illegally and criminally, but they can just rebuild, right? This is all about timelines. All we're doing is delaying the inevitable. If we actually want to prevent them having nuclear weapons, there's a deal to be done. There's no bombing campaign that can end the nuclear, unquote, threat from Iran.
The critical thing in what you just said is, if you want to prevent them from building a nuclear bomb, that has not been the objective from the Israeli side. The objective has been to create a scenario in which the United States and Israel are going to be in a constant effort to degrade Iran. What you're going to see now, and you're already seeing, is that the Mossad cells that have been set up inside of Iran, which is really the success story from the Israeli side. It's not their bombing campaign. They're now going after Iranian scientists. They just killed one and his wife in Rome earlier today. So they're going to go after essentially the knowledge base. They're going to go after other things. They're supporting Kurdish separatists, Baluchi separatists, Arab separatists in different parts of Iran to foment unrest and civil war. This, by no means stretch of the imagination, is the end. And this is part of the reason why opposition to the war in the Iranian-American community and other places has been very much focused on the realization that there is no such thing as a clean story here. Once this starts, because of the fact that this is driven by geopolitical motivations and not because of non-proliferation concern at the root of it, this is just going to be the beginning, and we're going to see some very, very disturbing and destabilizing events going on.
A lot of people watching are making the point that this also helps the Israelis in Gaza. It's diverted the world's attention from the ongoing genocide. There are continuing massacres going on in Gaza at these quote-unquote humanitarian aid sites, and we've been covering that at Zeteo, but a lot of the rest of the media has stopped talking about Gaza because Iran's taken over, and Donald Trump has played into that. He's helped Netanyahu cover up his crimes in Gaza. He's added to the crimes in Iran. If you're Benjamin Netanyahu, how happy are you tonight? Is this kind of a one and done, or do you think he can get Trump to bomb again?
No, I think if you're Netanyahu right now, you're tremendously happy because his whole campaign was predicated on his ability to be able to drag the U.S. into the war. And it wasn't that much dragging. At the end of the day, the responsibility is with Trump himself. He's the president. He's responsible for his actions. He decided to do this. But Netanyahu's entire campaign was premised on him being able to get the U.S. in. If the U.S. didn't get in, this would have ended up much, much worse for the Israelis in the short term, at least for Netanyahu. But I think it's also very important to keep one thing in mind for those who remember the 2003 Iraq War. Remember the moment in which, initially, militarily, tactically, it was very successful. And it was so successful so that Bush decided to do that thing on that ship with that big banner behind it saying mission accomplished. Yeah. We've been there several times before. Tactical military success does not automatically translate into a strategic win. And in this specific case, we don't even know what damage was done and if the damage actually was done to the stockpile or just to an empty cave.
Trita, I know you're going to run soon, but just want to get a couple more things from you, just really important for your insights. And for people, again, I think we're up to nearly 10,000 people watching right now. For people joining, Trita's made some very important points comparing this to Osirak in 1981, where the Israelis bombed an Iraqi nuclear facility and actually encouraged Saddam to go for nuclear weapons. He's predicting 5 to 10 years from now, Iran could have a nuclear weapon precisely because of what happened tonight. This is not helping proliferation. And of course, the Gulf War, the 2003 Iraq invasion, where we thought we were winning and we weren't winning. Let's kind of hold back the congratulation notes that Trump is putting out. By the way, Trump supported the Iraq war. They spent the last week people saying that he opposed it. He supported the Iraq war. But one thing on this, Trita, the New York Times reported this week that if Khamenei was killed, that would also accelerate Iranian rush for the bomb. I would point out our good friend Ken Klippenstein is reporting tonight that the U.S. military is on high alert. There's 40,000 American troops in the region. They're worried about counterstrikes from Iran. So American troops, God forbid, might die as a result of Trump doing this for Netanyahu. If they were to kill Khamenei, God forbid, and escalate this even further, what is the reaction? I asked Reza Aslan and Tommy Vida this question in LA at our live event on Thursday. What do you think happens? Because the Israelis are not going to stop. Katz, the defense minister, said one of the goals of our war is to kill Khamenei. Trump has teased about doing it. If they were to do it, I dread to think what kind of gates of hell are open and what kind of reactions we see on U.S. soil around the Middle East.
So any assassination attempt at the leader of a country and under almost any circumstance will be interpreted as an effort to decapitate the regime as a whole. It appears that the messages that have been sent from the Trump administration in the last 12 or 24 hours has been that that is not their intent. It's just targeting the nuclear program. Whether that is something the Iranians believe, whether that is true or not, of course, remains to be seen. But I think any effort that would go in that direction, and this is part of the reason why the Israelis were really trying to see if they could do it, is because that would then lead the Iranians to believe that essentially there is no way out. Their only chance is to fight back and fight back as hard as possible. And that would bring about this major, major confrontation, which would then force, or the Israelis hope, would force the US to go in all out because the Iranians would go all out. The risk for that is still very much there. Again, it depends on how the Iranians react to these strikes. In the case of Soleimani, what happened there was that the Iranians gave a bit of a telegraphing of where they would hit, give the US a bit of a heads up, then they struck it really hard. It was just a matter of luck that no one died, but nevertheless, they decided to call it quits after that. In this specific case, it remains very unclear if they will stop at that or if they will go further. If they will choose to actually target more Israel than the US and let some militias target the US bases, it's still unclear.
So Donald Trump has been speaking while we're on air. He claims to have completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. As we know, Donald Trump is a serial liar. So we need to check that. As you pointed out earlier on this call, it's nighttime in Tehran, in Iran. It's still not fully, we don't know what's happened in the cover of darkness. He's been thanking and congratulating Benjamin Netanyahu. I remember, Trita, a few weeks ago, people were telling me there's this rift between Trump and Netanyahu. They've fallen out. They don't like each other. He didn't visit Netanyahu on his Middle East tour. He went to the Gulf. Well, that was all bullshit. A lot of this stuff is bullshit.
No, I don't think it was, Mehdi. I don't think it was. I think, keep in mind, this is Trump. Come on. No, hold on. Let me just. This is Trump. There's like so many rifts in all of those relationships.
But that's my point. So let me just define what I mean by bullshit. I'm not saying he didn't slag off Netanyahu, who doesn't like Netanyahu. I'm saying it doesn't matter when ultimately the US government will be at the beck and call of the Israeli government. Tonight, he's congratulating Netanyahu. You yourself said Netanyahu is very happy tonight. So it doesn't matter whether they get along or whether they shake hands or they visit each other or are best buddies. All that matters is, and when Israel needed the US government, Donald Trump and the Republican Party were there for him, just as the Democrats were there.
You make it sound, I get your point, and I don't think you're necessarily wrong, but I think you make it sound as if it's much easier than it was. There were some real battles going on. And it was not necessarily clear. Yes, in the sense, they were throwing everything at the wall, trying to make sure that they would go in this direction, and they succeeded. Ultimately, there's no doubt about that. Of course, you're right in that sense. But it wasn't.
What I would say, Trita, is you've been following this longer than I have, and you know how long the John Boltons of this world have wanted this war, and they didn't get it for 20 years. George Bush wrote in his memoir, and I've frozen again my image. Apologies, people joining. This is what happens when you do a reacting town hall in a hotel room. John Bolton, I think George Bush wrote in his memoir that he wanted to go to war, but the intel said he couldn't do it. Now we have a president who doesn't even care what the intel says, who told Tulsi, when Tulsi Gabbard said the intel's not there, he said, who cares what Tulsi Gabbard says, she's wrong, and she came out.
Yes, but you also had a CIA director that essentially was presenting Israeli intelligence throughout all of this. Yeah, and it was essentially completely taking the side of the Israeli intelligence services rather than the American intelligence services.
This is why you should watch Zeteo town halls, because we get people who know what they're talking about. Trita's 100% right. John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, former Republican congressman, is at the center of a lot of this stuff. And this is something I said to people, Trita, as you know, last year. And by the way, there's over 10,000 people watching tonight. I hope you're all Zeteo subscribers on YouTube and Substack, because this is the place where you actually get some unfiltered news and opinions. You actually get proper analysis, not the bullshit you get everywhere else. Zeteo was warning about this last year. We said Trump comes back, the war in Iran likelihood goes up. And one thing I was saying, Trita, was people were saying Donald Trump, and I know you had said, you know, it could go either way. He could be the peace president, or because he's so erratic, we could get to war. And we got the war part. I was always in that it's more likely to be war. My point always was, don't just look at Trump. Look at the people around him. And you look at who he staffed his administration with, the John Ratcliffes, the Marco Rubios, the Mike Huckabees. They're loving this stuff. They're loving the stuff in Gaza. They're loving the stuff in Iran. And therefore, it doesn't matter whether Donald Trump goes to Michigan and pretends to be anti-war. All that matters is what he does in office. And what he's done now, let's wrap up by asking you this, Trita. Historically, how big a historic moment is this tonight, this Saturday night, with America attacking Iran for the first time?
I think it's really unprecedented in terms of at least what is going on between the United States and Iran. That's been a torturous relationship, of course. Going back at least till 1953, when the United States overthrew the Iranian prime minister at the time, democratically elected, and then supported the Shah for 37 years, and then supported Saddam Hussein in the Iraq-Iran war. The Iranians took American hostages. There's been so many back and forth between the two sides. There's been some positive developments, quite a few negative ones. Nothing comes close to this in terms of a direct confrontation between the two sides. And it's only the beginning.
It is only the beginning, or as Winston Churchill might have said, the end of the beginning. We are where we are. As I say, we were warning about this last year. I do hope people watching will subscribe to Zeteo to get more of our analysis, commentary, live reaction. We appreciate Trita Parsi taking time out to give us his expertise. He's been following this for decades, written wonderful books on the subject. I urge you to check them out. I would say what Trump did tonight is illegal, unconstitutional, disastrous in many ways. We will see how the Iranians respond. One thing you won't hear on a lot of the US media is about what the Iranian response will be. Often when we go to war, we talk about foreign countries as if they're just passive actors who just kind of follow whatever script we lay down for them. And as Trita pointed out, we learned from the Iraq war that, you know what, other people fight back against our aggressive attacks. And I think those of us who want a more peaceful Middle East should be speaking out against all of this. Zeteo will continue to speak out against this kind of aggression, illegality, and self-destructiveness. We're going to leave it there. Thank you all for joining us at short notice. Keep an eye out on your inboxes. We'll be sending more analysis and commentary your way. As Trita says, this is only the beginning. Peter Hegseth apparently will be giving his statement tomorrow morning. I'm sure you're all on tenterhooks to hear from the United States Defense Secretary and Christian nationalist. Trita, thanks for joining us. Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.